Hello to all my friends. Here I am again, Xiomara Mayo Ingram, with our session of Emotional Cafe tonight with effective communication. Thank you for welcoming you to your lives, to your hearts, and to your homes. And I hope you have invited some of your friends, some of your relatives, your family members to enjoy this special presentation that we have for you. Here I have my little coffee as every week, and I hope you have yours too. And as usual, I have to remind you a couple of things. Let me verify that the chat is working just to make sure that I get to read your answers. I want to remind you that you can participate in Emotional Cafe in our weekly live session by chatting your question, letting me know what you think, how you feel, and I'll be making sure that I address whatever question you may have, whatever concern, so I can actually answer your question live, so that way you don't have to wait for later on. At the same time, I want to remind you that if you have not signed up for the newsletter yet, you still have the opportunity to do so. All you have to do is go to emotionalcafe.com and click on to subscribe for the newsletter. It's totally free, just as Emotional Cafe, and just put your email address. That's all the information that we need, your email address, and then you're going to be receiving an email in which you're going to be confirming that you want to receive the newsletter. Our February issue, it's coming out this coming Sunday, so you cannot miss it. So if you haven't done that, please do so. I also want to remind you that you can follow Emotional Cafe on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and very soon we'll be on Pinterest with some Emotional Cafe quotes. So I really hope that you enjoy all the different benefits that we are trying to offer you through Emotional Cafe, which is a virtual platform for you. It's totally yours. Email me with whatever suggestion for a topic that you would want me to address. Email me with your situation, and I'll make sure that I can reply to you and give you our best recommendation for you. So with that said, I am going to start talking about effective communication and the importance of why we need to try to practice effective communication with everybody that we interact. As usually, I want to be able to explain you why I chose this topic. And we all know how important communication is. We are social human beings. We are always interacting with other people. We need to be around other people, and therefore it is extremely important that we learn to communicate in an effective way so we get to understand one another. So it's not only about us sharing how we feel, what we think, or our opinions, but also to understand what the others are expressing as well. So that's what communication is about. It's also extremely important to be able to interact appropriately when we are in any social setting. And also through this effective communication topic, we get to reflect a little bit on how we're communicating currently with our the people that we are interacting every day, but also we get to reflect on some specific skills that we need to continue trying to nurture in order to improve our relationships. So with that said, let's start with the definition of communication, because if we're going to be talking about effective communication, we need to be able to understand what communication is about. And I have different meanings, like I usually do for you tonight. One of the meanings says that it means sharing something, exposing something that we might have in common or not, but it means exposing. It's an exposure. Imparting or exchanging information or news, that's another definition of communication. Other people see communication as means of connection between people, and sometimes even between places. So that's also a good description of what communication is. I have another one that says that is the purposeful activity of information exchange between two or more participants in order to be able to understand meanings through a shared system of signs and rules. So that's a more elaborated definition, but still it continues to imply that it has to do with sharing information and understanding. It is a message that is given to someone. And finally, it implies the transmission of a specific information. Now, what I did was I grouped some words that to me are pretty much related to communication, and I wanted to share with you on being able to define communication in one word. So this is what I did. I put a group of words together to illustrate what communication is about, and I can summarize them like this: connection, sharing, interacting, transmitting, exchanging, exposing, informing, imparting. So those are words that are related to communication, and in a way give us a one-word meaning for us to understand. Now, it is important also to understand there's two types of communication, and I believe this is something that we all know. These are kind of stuff that we learn since we're little kids, but it is important that we understand them and that we get to put them in the context that we're going to be seeing it tonight. The two main categories, the two main types of communication are verbal and nonverbal. And the verbal communication refers to words and voice inflections, such as the tone of voice when we're talking. It's something that particularly I find myself doing a lot. Some people have more like a singing when they're talking, but you can kind of tell the tone of their voice, if they're happy, if they're excited, if they're sad. So pretty much that inflection, that those voices inflections and whatever words are coming out of our mouth, that what implies verbal communication. Now, the nonverbal communication, and this is amazing, it pretty much represents between 65 and 85% of how we communicate. And it implies eye contact, our visual contact, how we're the expressions of our eyes. It implies the face or facial expressions, how our face reacts to the other person when we're talking to them or when we're receiving their message. The movements, this is something that I do a lot with our hands or our arms. I particularly talk a lot and I use my body, so especially my hands and arms, so those movements with your arms and hands. And the body language, the distance that you put between you and the other person that you're talking to, as well as the body posture, you know, how we show if we're tense, if we're crossing our arms, if we're kind of laid back and relaxed. So all these, our eyes, our face, our arms and hands, and our entire body are what is implied in nonverbal communication. And actions, these actions need to go in compliance with our words. It is important that both the verbal and nonverbal messages kind of coincide. They kind of go in compliance with one another. So elements of communication, well, this is also basic communication stuff that we need to know as we are talking about communication. So we have the sender, which is the person that is actually talking. We have the receiver, which is the other person that is listening and is receiving whatever message we're sharing. We have the message itself, which is whatever information we're trying to share or transmit. We have the channel or medium, which is the way in which we communicate. We have the noise, which pretty much refers to the channel and the semantic used. And we have the context, which is the communication environment. So all these things play together when we are talking or referring about communication. So here comes a very important key: effective communication. What do I mean by effective communication? Well, effective communication goes beyond simply talking. It has to do with, we can say that it's really effective when the person that is receiving the message, the person that is listening, gets to understand and interprets and really gets the message exactly in the sense that the person that is sharing it wanted, or the way that they were intended to transmit. That is what makes the key for effective communication to happen. So that means that if we're talking to someone, but this person is understanding something totally different or is not getting it, we are not showing effective communication, because it takes both people. It takes the person that is sharing the information to share it in a clear, concise, precise way, but it also implies, to be effective, that the other person receives it and understood and interpret it in exactly the same way that we wanted it to be. So that's very important. Now, the main and most important thing when we're talking about effective communication, you're not going to believe what it is. You might think it's talking. You might think it's the part when you're speaking and when you're saying your message. But actually, it's to listen. Listening is the most important, and at the same time is the hardest of all the communication skills. And you might ask, why? Simply because sometimes we're talking and we are there's lack of communication. Sometimes we're more into what we're saying than trying to transmit the message itself, or the person that is listening is not really paying attention because they want to share their part. They don't really want to listen to you, but they want to talk as well. And that need of speak that sometimes make us feel kind of boring when we're listening. So that's why listening is such an important skill when we're talking about effective communication. And this is something that we all need to practice, because again, it's not only about us. Now, what is the difference between hearing and listening? Because some people say, I hear you, I hear you, I get you, I hear you. But the truth is that hearing and listening are not the same thing. And the reason why that happens is because active listening is to actually listen and understand what the person is not only saying, but the feeling, the thoughts, the ideas, everything that this person is giving you within lines, between those lines as they are speaking. When you're getting the whole picture, then you're listening, because you can understand and connect with those feelings, with those ideas, with how they feel, with if they're frustrated, if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're anxious. You're getting all this. You're not only getting the words, but you're getting the whole thing. Now, when we're hearing, we pretty much are only perceiving sounds. There are some jokes that says that when you're hearing, you just hear blah, 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 because you're not really getting it. You're not really understanding what the message is about. You're just hearing a whole bunch of sounds coming from someone's mouth. And sometimes we see it in comedies illustrated, that they see and they are looking at someone, but all they see is the person kind of doing mimes, like, so pretty much the person is not really getting what you're saying, because they're hearing you, they're hearing sounds, but they're not actually processing and getting the message that you want them to get. So that's a difference between hearing and listening. And I have a funny example myself. The other day, I got myself in a situation with my 13-year-old. I was doing something in the kitchen and I was really into what I was doing, and then he's talking to me, and honestly I said I was listening, but I was not. I was just hearing, and he was talking nonstop, and I kept saying but I was not paying attention, and he was actually asking for my permission to do something. And then when he did it and I got mad, he said, but mom, I asked for your permission, and you say well, I got myself into that situation because simply I was not paying attention. I was not listening. All I was doing was hearing. There were sounds coming out of his mouth, but I was not connecting with the message. I was not really connecting with him, and therefore that was not effective communication. So, elements that helps when it's time for us to listen, we need to know that there are 3 specific elements that needs to play out in order for us to listen actively and effectively as well. The psychological preparation. We need to know it's our turn to listen. This other person is in need to speak their mind, and it's our turn to listen. So sometimes when we're tired, when we've had a hard day, maybe at work, maybe we've been busy, maybe we are not in the mood to listen, then it's better that we just don't put ourselves on the spot, because trust me on this, it's going to show. If you are not psychologically prepared to listen, yeah, you are going to show, and you're gonna see later when I am showing, when I'm sharing with you some signs that you are not really listening or that you are not being a good listener. The observation. You have to be fully observing the other person, giving your entire attention, not only with your mind, but with your eyes, with your body, making sure that you're understanding and getting the message. And the third element that helps active listening, help us being good listeners, is to express cues when we're listening, both verbally and non-verbally, that we are actually getting it. Like when you go, yes, I see. Really, that's verbal cue that you're actually listening, but also with your eyes, with your posture. You're showing with your entire body that you're paying attention, and those are pretty much the elements for being good listeners and have active listening. Important skills when we are communicating. When you're listening to someone trying to communicate their whatever they're sharing with you, show empathy. It's not about you. It's not about agreeing with this other person. It has to do with you being able to put on that person's shoes and kind of feel for them, kind of sense what they're feeling. So just show empathy. Another good and important skill is to paraphrase what they're saying, so you are making sure with this that you're getting the appropriate message, that you're understanding correctly. And also reinforcing through words and validation, that also shows that you are being a good listener. And summarizing, kind of like wrapping it up to make sure that you understood correctly what this person was saying at the end, kind of gives an idea that you were actually there, that you were listening attentively to this person. Now, key elements. What will make you fail when you're listening? And this is what I told you, that if you're not psychologically prepared, if you're not observing, if you are not into the conversation, somehow it's going to show. And let me tell you what are those key elements that usually come into play when we are not active listening to what's going on and what they're sharing with us. For instance, distractions. Don't allow distractions. These are the key things that when they happen, pretty much the conversation is going to be a total disaster. So don't allow distractions. Try to keep your attention exactly on the now, on what the conversation is and what you're listening, to try to follow on the sequence of events that this person is sharing with you, or feelings, or whatever. No interruptions. Do not interrupt. This is really important when we are talking about effective communication. No judgment. This is not about judging. This is not about who's right or wrong. Simply, when we're listening, when it's our turn to listen, we just have to listen. Don't go making judgments on why this person's feeling like this, or why it's acting like that, or why it's saying this. Simply listen. Don't offer premature help or solutions. Sometimes we just jump into conclusions and we really want to tell the solution. Probably we want the conversation to be over, but don't do that, because that's also another key element that is going to make you fail when you're supposed to be listening. Don't invalidate what the other person is feeling. And I like giving the example of, do not say, oh, don't worry, oh, that's nothing, because you're actually invalidating what this person is feeling or saying. And sometimes it might be nothing for you, or you might think it's going to be okay, but this person is talking and is sharing anxiety and is kind of venting it out. So just don't invalidate what they are feeling. Feelings are not good or bad, they just are, and we have to let them be vented, and sometimes talking it out makes the person feel much better. Don't start telling your story when it's the other person's turn to be talking. And I have a question coming in. Sometimes I try to talk to my son, but he's so distracted, usually by video games, that he looks at me, but I can tell he isn't hearing me at all. What can I do to get through him without getting angry and shutting down the games? Well, my recommendation will be as follows, and I totally understand because I go through it with my own son. And one thing that I have played with him, he likes it since he was a little kid, he wanted me to have his attention. Like when he's talking to me, he wants me to be looking at him and listening. And like the other day that I was not listening, so sometimes I said, I gotta tell you something, but I need your entire attention. You need to pause the game for me to talk to you. I really want to talk to you. And sometimes he will try to negotiate because he'll say, can I finish this or whatever? And sometimes I have to kind of negotiate. But then when it stops, then I get his attention because he really wants to be able to listen to me, to know what is it that I'm going to say in order to move forward, to move away from this situation. So just be patient. Sometimes we have to remember the different in ages, in interests, and that's something that I'm going to be talking a little bit down further tonight, how we communicate. And sometimes it's something we forget when we're talking to a 13-year-old. And again, I'm not being judgmental. This is something that I frequently do myself. I forget that he's 13, and sometimes my expectations when we're communicating are that he's going to be thinking or getting my opinion just the way that I feel or the way that I think it, when the truth is that I have probably 3 times his age, not to say more, and that there's no way that he can actually connect with some of my levels of opinions, but it's just to try to get through him. So just be patient and loving, and I'm sure that you're going to be able to get through your son. I hope I answer your question. Let me continue with the key elements that will make you fail when it's time for you to be a good listener. Do not counter argument. Do not try to prove that you're feeling worse or that you're in worse shape than the other person, because again, this is a time for you to listen. Be a good listener. And avoid the expert syndrome. Avoid thinking that you know everything or that you know what's best. Again, sometimes it's just about listening, being that shoulder, being that friend for that person. So keep that in mind. When we're talking about effective communication, we also need to consider 2 important things: assertiveness, being assertive, being able to be concise, precise, and to the point, but also respect. It doesn't mean that I impose what I think. It means that I am able and capable of saying what I feel, what I think, without having to disrespect anybody. When I am disrespectful to others, I'm disrespecting myself as well. So keep that in mind, because sometimes people tend to raise their voice. They probably think that because they're raising their voice, the other person is going to be listening to them better, when actually it doesn't happen like that. It has to do with the way you say things, with the way you communicate. The ability to communicate actually implies to know what is it that you want to say, what is the message that you want to share, to whom you're going to be saying that message to, who you're going to be sharing it with, when is the best time to do it, and how to communicate. Sometimes we want to talk about something and we want to do it now because I want to talk about this now. Well, and this is something that you can actually apply to any type of relationship you might have with anybody. Sometimes you have to decide when is the best time to talk about this or about that. Okay, so it's not about rushing it because I want to get it out of the way right now. Sometimes being patient and being able to choose for the appropriate time might make the difference to get through the other person. I have another opinion here. A wise man once told me that when we yell, people don't listen, but when we talk quietly, we force them to listen closer. And this is actually correct. And let me tell you that sometimes people tend to scream out and kind of yell because they want their opinions to be actually heard and listened to. And sometimes you kind of have to change the dynamics, because sometimes it might be a cultural thing. Maybe it might be something that within that family that this person was raised and brought up was something that was normal and common. So remember that sometimes we have to be entitled to change the dynamics on how we interact with others. And effective communication means that sometimes we're going to have to model how we want to communicate. Okay, if the other person is yelling and therefore you're yelling too, then you're creating a dynamic that is not actually the healthiest way and the most effective way to communicate. So you might have to think it through and model it and kind of change the tempo when it's to that communication reference point. Okay, so some obstacles in the communication that we need to consider that might happen sometimes will be misunderstanding, when people, they just interpret whatever they think they are receiving, but the truth is that it's totally different from what we were saying. And distortion, and sometimes distortion might happen, not because they don't understand, but because they have a different feeling or a different opinion. Sometimes they don't hear well. This happens with people with hearing problems, so they might be getting a total distorted message, but it has to do with not being able to hear appropriately. So take that in mind, take that into consideration, keep it in mind when you are communicating, to make sure that you have share your message the way that it should go across. Now, let's reflect a little bit on how we communicate with different people that we interact. For instance, with our spouses, with our partners in life, with our significant others, with our wife, with our husband. How are we communicating? And this is really important because communication it's such a huge foundation in a relationship to make it work. Through good communication, a couple pretty much can overcome whatever problem they have. So this is really huge. And I have a couple of aspects that improve relationships when it comes to communication that I want to be able to share with you when it comes to effective communication. And the first one, and again, right now I'm going to refer to couples, to spouses, to partners, to significant others. When you're talking about let's say that you're having an issue, that this person does something that bothers you. Try to talk about what he does or what she does, not who he is or who she is. Do not use labels to refer, but rather to the action itself. This is really important. And again, I have to bring it across because it also comes with the children. The message has to be clear. It's what you did that I dislike. It's what you did that hurt me. It's what you did that I don't like. It's what you did. It's this action itself. But that doesn't make you a person that I don't love anymore, or a person that I don't like, or a bad person. It just means that this action that you chose, or this way that you acted, that you chose to act, it hurt me, or it made me feel like this or like that. But try to keep it to the action, to what the person did or what the person does, rather than who the person is and how they are, because that we tend to do that sometimes, and again we end up hurting and regretting what we have said. So keep that in mind when you are communicating with your loved one. Talk about one issue, one topic, one problem, one at a time. Sometimes we want to come because we have this issue and then we start bringing a whole long list of many other issues. No, one at a time. Deal with one thing at a time. One thing that I always remind clients when I'm working with them: you cannot try to solve the entire life at this moment. You cannot try to solve all the problems that you've been probably having for 35 years of your life within these 60 minutes. You just can't. So just keep that open mind that right now we're dealing with this, then let's keep it only this topic, only this problem, only this issue, and let's deal with this one. And one at a time we can deal with each one of the things that are affecting us. Do not add up your negative emotions. Don't go putting them, it is like a boiling pot that you have. You keep adding negative emotions and you get angry at this and then you get angry at that and you don't talk, you keep it inside, and eventually the hostility is going to come out because it's inevitable. So do not hold on to those toxic negative emotions. Talk about it, okay? Vent it out in an appropriate and respectful way. Do not bring back the past. And again, these are aspects that will improve your communication with your loved one. Do not bring back the past. Whatever happened, whatever you have already discussed and talked out and solved, do not bring it back out. Why? What for? What do you think you're going to accomplish with that? You're just adding more problems. And again, let's go back to the rule of talking one thing, one problem, dealing with one at a time. So do not bring back the past. It is important that if you already solve it, that if you have forgiven this specific situation that happened, you put it aside. And if you need to vent it out, it's your thing, it's your issue. Do not bring it back between you and this person that you love, because it's really going to cause problems in the communication. People tend to block themselves because they're feeling attacked. So this is extremely important that you keep in mind and you practice this at all times. Be specific. This is something that especially women, we tend to go around and we're talking about this, but then we take this detour and we're adding all these other details. It's funny, and I always use the illustration with my husband that sometimes I'm telling him things, and as I go on and on and on, because I'm talking about this, but in the conversation I go this way, and I keep talking, and I go around and I add other names and I add other situations, and sometimes he's looking at me and he's like, what are you talking about? Because I already lost him, because I'm just talking about so many different things that sometimes are not related only probably to the name, okay, or things that have nothing to do with what I'm gonna say, that sometimes I just have to laugh because I realize that I'm wandering around. Be specific. Talk about what you're going to be talking, but be specific. Don't go by the branches. Don't go around and bringing up other stories. Keep it clear in your mind. Another very important one, avoid to generalize. Stop using words like always and never. You always do this. You always did that. You never do this. You never do that. Stop with those. Those are not good friends to a relationship, and they're the worst enemies to effective communication. So just forget about using words like always or never. Do not generalize. Be brief, to the point. Again, be specific. Watch your nonverbal communication. This is really important because sometimes we said that we're listening, or that we've forgiven, or that we are willing to solve the problem, but our nonverbal communication is showing totally the opposite. So make sure that you are keeping your verbal and nonverbal communication aligned in a way that they actually coincide. Choose appropriate time and place. Let me tell you, sometimes with conversations, that's the key. Choose the appropriate time and place. The other day I was using the illustration that maybe you want to talk to your husband or your wife. I use the example of the husband. Let's imagine that I want to talk to my husband about changes that are happening and a new decision that I might have to make. But he's washing the car. And I want to talk about that. And I go downstairs and he's all wet, washing the car with a hose full of soap. But there I am talking about this huge decision that I have to make. Do you think that is the appropriate time and moment? Place? Not at all. We need to be smart, and this is for both women and men. Choose the appropriate time and place, and I can tell you that the probabilities for effective communication to happen are higher than just bursting out and saying things whenever you feel like you need to say them. Just choose the appropriate time and place, and I can guarantee that you're going to have a more effective communication. But let's go back to reflecting on how we communicate with others. How do we communicate with our friends? Our female friends, our male friends, it doesn't matter. Sometimes I have seen, and this is something that I have also worked with clients, sometimes we have friends, okay, and we want to tell them what to do. That's how we communicate with them, really bossy, telling them what to do, telling them what we expect them and what we think is best for them. Guess what? That's being totally disrespectful because it's the other person's call. You are there to listen. You are there to give your opinion when asked. This is a rule that I have applied to myself, especially when I was starting getting trained to be working on the counseling field and with clients. Because then I would go and hang out with my friends, and then I thought I was everybody's counselor, everybody's therapist. And guess what? I was just a friend. And I decided to set the boundary to myself that I was not going to give my opinion unless I was asked what I thought about something. And let me tell you, it's been great because my friends feel that I am their friend. And when they ask for my opinion, I usually say, well, this is my opinion, but remember, it's your situation, it's your life, whatever you consider is best for you, whatever gives you peace, I'm gonna support you, I'm your friend, but this is your call. Now, you ask for my opinion, I see it like this, I see it like that, but again, it's not me wearing your shoes. So, it's your call. Because then that way you put that ball again on their side of the court. This is extremely important. We are to respect and have effective communication also with our friends. They're important people, they're our support system, but we need to be considerate. It's not about buzzing them around or telling them what to do. As a matter of fact, no one likes to be told what to do. So this is extremely important that we implement an appropriate communication with our friends. How are we communicating with our boss, our co-workers? How are we talking? Are we the type of person that can express how we feel or what we think in an appropriate, respectful way, trying to look for the team's solution of the problem? Or are we the type of person that goes sneaking around in the corners, talking on the back of others at the office, at the working field? Again, I can say that being able to communicate effectively can be something that can be considered when you are being asking maybe for a promotion, because that's a skill that usually leaders have. They know how to communicate in an effective way. So take that into consideration. How are we communicating with our children? Are we taking into consideration that there are children? Are we understanding that they'll grow up and that they have the opportunity to make their own mistakes? Or we are expecting that regardless their age, just because I'm their mother or their father, they have to do what I said that they need to do? This is a tough one, and I tell you that I have a 21-year-old myself, and one of the things that I told him when he turned, I think it was when he turned 18, and I repeated it again when he turned 21. I said to him, it's now your turn. You're going to be making decisions. I can tell you that many of your decisions, I won't like them, but they are your decisions, and I'm going to have to respect them. Sometimes they'll be very bad decisions. I'm here to give you my opinions. I'm here to give you an advice, to give you a recommendation. But again, you're going to have to be learning from your own decisions. And every decision we make has a consequence. But let me tell you this, between you and me, as a mother, as a parent, that is not easy. Sometimes you wish you can grab them by the neck and actually bring some sense into that head. But guess what? We need to remember that they have the same right that we had when we were that age, and we wanted to live life and we wanted to make our own decisions. Now with youngers, remember that you can set up the rules and the dynamics. One of the things that I always tell my 13-year-old, sometimes when I have a rule at home and he protests, I tell him he's going to be a lawyer because he always complains about it. But one of the things I tell him, and this kind of keeps him grounded, is the fact that in my house there are my rules, and you might not like them, you might not be happy about them, but you have to respect them because you're living in my house, you're my dependent, you're too young, and I am responsible. So therefore I make the choices, I make the decisions, and you'll have to accept them. So sometimes I get to agreements, I get to negotiate with him, but again, we need to remember that it's about communication. I know that some of us were probably raised in families with patterns of total lack of interaction with the kids. I remember in my country, to little kids, when I was a little girl, I remember that children were not allowed to interact with adults when they were talking. We have very rigid rules. And again, we try to be different with our kids, but we need to be able to find some sort of balance. We need to be able to find moments in which we can share and talk to our kids and develop a good communication relationship with them, because that's going to help us when we're having issues, other discipline issues and stuff, that we can sit down with them and actually get through them, because it will be based on the kind of communication that we have been building up with them. So again, with our children, these are dynamics that we create, and effective communication is something that needs to happen with them, because as it's happening with them, we're actually teaching them how to communicate effectively, and we're teaching these kids to become adults that will be able to communicate effectively as well in their future lives, in their future relationships. So this is beyond yourself. This is bigger than you. So when you're communicating with your kids, remember, respect starts by respecting them. Sometimes we communicate by yelling. You can still address the rules, you can still address what you want them to accomplish without needing to yell, without needing to disrespect your kids. By modeling respect, you will be teaching them how to respect others and how to respect themselves as well. Finally, how's our communication with our parents? And I know that this is a tough one, especially when you're older, like my age, because your parents probably are older as well if they're still with you. And sometimes it's hard to understand that they still see us as little kids. I tell you this from my own perspective, because my mother is one that it doesn't matter how old I am. I'm her youngest, and she still sees me like her little daughter. And sometimes I find her giving me instructions on how to do things, or if it's raining, she would say something like, "Don't get wet so you don't get sick." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's totally forgot that I'm an adult with my own life. But this is what life is about. Another thing is to be able to express how we feel when they are not validating our decisions or the things that we do. It is important that we can express how we feel in a respectful way. We don't need to fight with them. We still need to maintain that effective communication with them. It doesn't matter if they never did it with you. As you are learning, this is about you growing emotionally, becoming stronger, getting a better quality of life, and being able to have good relationships with everybody, including your parents, is an important key in your life. So keep that in mind. Sometimes we have unresolved issues from our past. Sometimes we have been hurt by our parents, but this is a moment in which you need to decide for how long you're going to be dragging that along your life. If you want a better life, you need to make changes, and it doesn't matter that they don't do it. It doesn't matter that they don't communicate effectively. When you start making the difference, when you change that dynamic, it's just amazing how they'll just play along. It's like dancing, you know. Maybe they don't know how to dance to the song that you're playing, but as you're moving, they'll be able to follow through. So that's really important on how we communicate with our parents. Again, we were just reflecting, going over specific things to make effective communication a foundation for our relationship with our spouses, our partners, our significant other, in our relationships, our friends, how we communicate with our friends, how we communicate at work with our coworkers, with our boss, our supervisor, our children, which is a very important foundation to pass along to them, and finally our parents. And I want to be able to wrap up our presentation tonight with special reminders to keep in mind and to keep in as you're communicating with others. Communication is essential for you to be happy. It's not about what others do, it's not about how others communicate, it's about you putting all your effort into communicating effectively, but also being a good listener. It will influence all your relationships, it will influence other people's decisions when they're interacting with you. I can tell you that there's people that have been able to get a promotion or a salary raise or a better job or opportunities just simply by the way that they communicate. An effective communication avoid mistakes such as personal attacks when you are communicating with others. They won't feel attacked by you. It's about expressing what you feel, what you think in a respectful way, being able to know that this is your opinion, this is yours, it's your right, but you don't need to yell, you don't need to impose, you don't need to manipulate, you don't need to lie, you don't need to try to control what the other person think or feel about whatever you're sharing. So that's what effective communication is about. And just remember that when you are communicating, it's not only about what you're saying, but also about what you're showing. And when it comes to love, love goes along a lot beyond words. Sometimes we say that actions can mean much more than words, and that's what it means. It means that you show it not only with your words, but effective communication means that you communicate whatever it is that you are trying to share, both in a verbal and non-verbal way. Well, my friends, I think that's all for tonight. That has been our topic on effective communication. I want to remind you that I'm your life coach, Xiomara Mayo Ingram. I work with clients individually. If you're interested in having an individual session, you can send me an email. You can go to our website and send me an email. All my information is there, so we can accommodate you. You can send me an email explaining me what your situation is and what your best schedule is, and I'll make sure that I'll contact you to coordinate in a flexible schedule for you to have individual sessions. Also, I am open to go and attend workshops and group sessions if that's what you will be interested in having. And also, I want to remind you that Emotional Cafe is a total free virtual platform for you to get the emotional support to you, for you to continue growing, for you to continue becoming better and being able to accomplish more in both your personal and professional lives. So invite others to benefit from Emotional Cafe. It is yours and we need your help by sharing. If you feel like donating, your donations are the ones that are keeping us free for everybody to reach. And we're also having a sponsorship program in which you can become a sponsor. So if you have a business that you would like maybe to have an exchange with us to advertise, let us know. Send us an email and let us talk to you about it and see how we can help you grow as you help us continue providing this emotional support to so many people around the world who needs it. Again, thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you on Thursday next week. Thank you. Have a great evening.